Welcome back to Gen Z Unplugged. Today we are sharing a special lecture that our president, Kimberly Begg, gave at Grove City College. She talks about Christian womanhood and what it means to be a conservative woman in the culture today, the importance of Gen Z, and how to live a life of principled leadership. We hope you enjoy Kimberly's remarks.
Thank you, Clarissa. Yeah, we began this series about 3 years ago. The Conservative Mind is based on a book by the author Russell Kirk. By the way, no relation to Charlie, right? It's a different Kirk. Russell Kirk was a major founder of the conservative movement. And I think our kickoff lecture was Jonah Goldberg, right, Robert? And then last year we had Brad Berzer, Dan McCarthy, Joe LeConte, Rusty Reno of First Things, and so it's really great to bring Kimberly here, one of my all-time favorite conservatives out there, and so you're going to a treat tonight to get to hear from her. Now her bio, this is classic. It's just she's very humble, and I asked her for a bio right before I came up, and it's just like 3 sentences. So I'll read that, and then I'll tell you more about her. But Kimberly Begg is an attorney with decades of experience advancing conservative causes. She's president of the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women, which is a national nonprofit that prepares and promotes conservative women leaders. Known for her strong national profile through media appearances and speaking engagements across the country, she's also the author of Unbreakable: Saints Who Inspired Saints to Moral Courage, which is a really neat book through Tan Books. So it's about not just saints with like unbreakable courage, right, but the saints who inspired saints. It was a really clever idea. Now, that's her kind of standard bio. I'll tell you a little bit more. She is a native of Somerville, New Jersey, where she attended North Huntington, right? Yeah, so my wife attended Huntington, which was down the road, and she just told me they were rivals. So maybe you two had met at some point along the line, I don't know. From there she attended Rutgers University as an undergrad, and then she went to law school at George Mason University. She and her husband, Ian, a great guy, have 5 kids, and she said that her baby is now 11, right? Now, I first met her through Young America's Foundation. And Young America's Foundation is just an outstanding organization. In fact, probably, again, to mention Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, Young America's Foundation, ISI, Intercollegiate Studies Institute. These are some of the main groups that have been out there for young conservatives going back to the 1960s. She did development, fundraising, programs, lecture series. She started a terrific series called Standing Up for Faith and Freedom. It would be perfect for us, right? Institute for Faith and Freedom. That was quarterly, I think, initially, and now is twice a year, and Claire Hinshaw has picked it up. Just a great program that they hold at YAF headquarters in Reston, Virginia. By the way, anybody interested in interning, not just at Clare Boothe Luce, but also Young America's Foundation, she's still on the board with Young America's Foundation. She's also on the board. Young America's Foundation has a West Coast branch or West Coast headquarters, and that would be the Reagan Ranch Center in Santa Barbara. So the Reagan Ranch Center in Santa Barbara runs the Reagan Ranch, which is located in Rancho del Cielo, which is about a 40-minute drive from Santa Barbara. And it's run by Grove City College alum Andrew Coffin. But she's on the board of the Reagan Ranch Center. How long were you at YAF altogether? Almost 15 years. And then she stepped back for a little bit, and then very recently, 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, was hired by the Clare Boothe Luce Center, and I was thrilled when I heard that. It's a great organization, and it was run by Michelle Easton for a long time. So Michelle was married to Ron Robinson, who ran Young America's Foundation for a long time. And by the way, Ron's successor, Governor Scott Walker, we had him here for our Reagan lecture just a few months ago. But when she was hired to run the Clare Boothe Luce Center for conservative women, I thought that's just the perfect pick. She's the perfect person for that. And Clare Boothe Luce, so if you don't know her, I mean, Clare Boothe Luce was one of the most important conservative women, Republican women, really women in public policy and politics generally of the entire 20th century. I think at one point she was one of the five most commonly known, five most popular women in America. You know, like Eleanor Roosevelt, like Mimi Eisenhower, Clare Boothe Luce, and a couple others. She was a playwright. She acted. She modeled. She wrote for Vanity Fair. She was an editor. She became an ambassador. She became an elected congresswoman. Ended up advising the Reagan administration in the 1980s. So a really, really impressive individual. And when I found out that Kimberly was being hired to run it, I thought that perfect. She's perfect for that. So she's introduced me many times. This is my first time introducing her. So it's an honor to be able to introduce her and bring her here. Here you go, Kimberly Begg.
Oh my, that is just amazing. It's true, I have introduced Dr. Kangor many times at Young America's Foundation programs. My husband Ian and I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Kangor for the first time. I think it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's about right.
Which is kind of wild. But we remember having the opportunity to sit with him after one of his lectures. Dr. Kangor has been lecturing to students at Young America's Foundation's programs for decades now. We always invite you back to speak because he is such a wonderful and popular speaker. But actually, my introduction to Grove City College was through Dr. Kangor. And since then, over the years, I have had the pleasure of meeting so many impressive alumni. Most importantly, I think probably Andrew Coffin, who is the director of the Reagan Ranch in Santa Barbara. And I think really just exemplifies the kind of high integrity, very highly intelligent person going out there and doing important things in the world. You know, something that Dr. Kangor did not mention is that my book, Unbreakable, which was my first book, published by Tan Books, he was actually my editor, and he did a wonderful job editing the book, and I will always be grateful to him for that.
He needed very few edits.
Well, thank you. But the book wouldn't have happened without Paul, so I will always be grateful for that. So over the weekend, when I was developing my remarks, I went on your website at Grove City. And I went to your homepage, and I was delighted to see in big letters, you were made with a purpose, with a beautiful explanation that students at Grove City College, when they come here, they will discover and cultivate their God-given calling. And I have to say, when I read that, I got a little emotional because it was 3 days after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, for doing the most American activity there is, which is participating in the free exchange of ideas and on a college campus, talking to college students and inviting them to think deeply about who they are and what kind of country they want to live in. He was assassinated for living your mission out there in the world. I just want to say that what you are doing here at Grove City is so very important. You're forming young people to discover truth and to be truth tellers in all aspects of their lives for the purpose of achieving human flourishing, societal flourishing, and most importantly, heaven. This is what I'm doing at the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women, focusing, though, on outreach to young women. And I have learned a lot about Gen Z women during my time so far at the Luce Center. Their experience, really your experiences, those of you who are Gen Z here, are very different than my experiences. I was born in 1976. I'm a Gen X woman. The baby boomers before me, the millennials right after me. Gen Z is a very unique generation. And your experiences are very unique. And for some of the older people in the audience, I want to share just 6 of the, I think, most interesting aspects of the Gen Z experience that really set you apart from the generations that came before you. The first, an observation that Mary Eberstadt has made. I don't know if you're familiar with Mary's work, but she's brilliant. She's written many books. She's a wonderful speaker, a very, very deep and thoughtful woman. And she has said that it is a matter of simple arithmetic when it comes to young people and your support system. In the history of the world, there has never been a generation with a smaller support system than Gen Z. And that is because, not only are there a lot of broken families in the Gen Z generation, but a lot of people, 40%, are born to no family. They're born to single mothers. And so there is a very large part of your population that grew up without their biological mother and biological father in the same house, and without biological siblings in the same house. And so just the numbers of it, there are fewer people to rely on, fewer people to trust you, fewer people to support Gen Z young people. This generation, you spend more time alone than any other generation that came before you. You spend less time outside and less time moving in general. And you exist in this really interesting hybrid world where even when you are in the presence of other people, you have your devices. And there is, for most of you, a constant connection on text and on social media. For many of you, it is the first thing that you do when you wake up in the morning is check social media. If you're having trouble sleeping in the middle of the night, you are on social media. That level of connectivity has never happened in the history of the world. Your generation is also exposed to pornography more and at a much younger age, and that has had profound and terrible consequences, terrible effect on all relationships, and especially relationships between men and women within marriages. And finally, the leftist indoctrination that begins in preschool. So for my generation, for Gen X, when I went to Rutgers, yes, I experienced a very leftist campus. But even there, we had our liberal professors who were, traditional classic liberals, who they may have disagreed with me about the role of government, but they were still engaged and they were still willing to hear me out, and they still supported free speech. Now we have kids going to preschool, being asked what their pronouns are, being told that little boys can become girls and little girls can become boys, and being really scared about things like climate change at a very early age. And politics has become the new religion for a lot of young people. Just to illustrate this, there's been a really shocking video that's been going around on social media the last few days. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's a mother asking her 2 young daughters, they look like they're younger than 10. She says to them, "I have the best news ever." Now, the news is that Taylor Swift had gotten engaged, okay? Have you seen this video? Okay, so she says, "I have the best news ever. Can you guess what it is?" And the older girl says, "Donald Trump died?" And the mom says, "Oh, no, I guess the second best news ever." And she said, "Elon Musk died?" And I said, "Okay, well, no, actually, let me tell you. So Taylor Swift got engaged, yay." These are little kids. These are little kids, and they are being indoctrinated with the kind of hate, the kind of intolerance for free speech, for traditional American values that Charlie Kirk was assassinated for. So your generation really is just very, very unique. So as a result, not surprising, Gen Z young people have higher levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and obesity than any other generation that came before you. And you are the unhappiest generation on record. This generation desperately needs support, desperately needs our guidance, and they are ripe for evangelization. I want to share something with you about my work that fascinates me. So the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We take no government money, which we also have in common with Grove City College, which is fantastic. And because of that, we rely on the generous support of men and women across the country who believe in our mission. Well, wouldn't you know it that many of our most generous supporters are men. As it turns out, these men have had strong women in their lives. Many of them have had strong wives that have helped them throughout their lives and have raised their children that they respect very, very much and even helped in their careers. And many of them had strong mothers themselves. And they talked to us about how important these women were in their lives and their formation. But they support our work because they know that women, conservative, virtuous, principled women, are crucial to forming strong families, strong communities, and a stronger, freer America. I mention that because the vision that I am going to share here with you about how Christian women can save the world, it is not just for women, and I'm so pleased that there are so many men here tonight. It's for men too. And in fact, it only works if men hear it too. I think about the influences on our young women in two different ways. Those coming from the left and those coming from conservatives and our allies who are with us in fighting these influences from the left. And I actually think that those influences from conservatives and from Christians are more important. I think there are a lot of conservatives out there who are doing fantastic work fighting the left. And I think that conservatives have gotten really good at identifying a lot of the really dangerous ideas coming from the left. So your radical modern feminism and atheism and materialism, Marxism, wokeism, and these ideas have been a disaster for men and women, and sabotaging that happiness and the flourishing of people everywhere. And it's important to call out these dangerous lies. Most of my career has been spent talking to the left and really pointing out some of those problems. But increasingly, I find myself shifting and having conversations with conservatives and Christians and trying to really flesh out what it is that we believe about who we are and why we were made, and especially about what we believe about Christian womanhood. Because what we believe about Christian womanhood is what is shaping our own families and our own communities. And it's really important that we know what we are all about so that we can be presenting a vision of Christian womanhood that is attractive and compelling and is going to inspire our own future generations of our own children, and then also the other men and women who are not raised in conservative and Christian families. So this may shock some of you to hear this, but I think that Christians and conservatives are handing Satan free victories by limiting women's potential and driving them into the hands of the enemy. And I want to explain this. In the history of the world, there has never been an institution that has respected women more than Christianity. But I see a lot of confusion among Christians about a woman's voice and her place in the home and the world. And I think it's doing a lot of harm to our women, to our men, to our children, and especially to secular women who should be flocking to Christianity, but they're not, because they have told the awful, terrible lie that Christianity is misogynistic. And yes, feminism is a cause of this, a huge cause of this. Our boys and our girls are told from a very young age that toxic masculinity is one of our most important problems out there in the world. When the truth, of course, is that we need strong men, strong husbands, strong fathers, and strong leaders, male leaders in all aspects of life. And our young girls and our young boys are told to devalue family, that there's more important work to be done out there than raising your children and being at home and raising stable families. And yes, they're told that there are political issues out there that are more important than religion, and as we've all seen, there's a lot of turning political ideas into religions. But I also think that Christians have not necessarily done the best job that we can in presenting a vision of authentic Christian womanhood that is compelling. I mentioned the book that I wrote that Paul edited called Unbreakable. It took me 1 year to write that book. I have to say, it was probably the best year of my life. I enjoyed the process so much, and one of the reasons that I did is because I spent every single day for about a year thinking about these saints and thinking about their lives. And so they were just a constant presence in my life, a constant friend, really. And so I still think about the saints that are in this book. And one of the saints I think about most is Joan of Arc, because she is one of the most fascinating historical figures who has ever existed. In fact, do you know that we know more about Joan than we know about any person who ever lived before her? She was 19 years old when we died, but because of her 2 trials and her own testimony and witnesses who were interviewed about Joan, we actually know more about her life than anybody who existed before her. So you all probably know that this teenage farm girl succeeded in leading a French army and saving France from English rule. Now, what you probably don't know about Joan is that one of her initial obstacles, even before she sought out the French king, the rightful French king, was from her own family. Her family had wanted her to marry, and the suitor that they chose for her also wanted the marriage. And he went to a court and tried to have the court order the marriage. And the court ruled in favor of Joan and told her she didn't have to be married. In fact, that she could not be forced to be married on the grounds that marriage requires the free consent of both parties. Joan didn't want to marry because she felt compelled that there was something waiting for her out in the world, and she felt called to do something for Christ that she felt like she needed to obey. I can't help but wonder what advice some modern Christians would have given to Joan in her day if they had given her the chance. Now, I spent a lot of time on X, somewhat because of my professional responsibilities, but somewhat because I am somewhat fascinated about what it is that our different people out in the world are thinking about the state of the world today. And it is perhaps because of the time that I spend on X that I happen to think that many modern Christian influencers would tell her, Joan, go home. Get married. I know that whatever you think it is that God is calling you to do in the world, he's not really calling you to do. So how do we make sense of the fact that Joan, this teenage farm girl, not only convinced the rightful king to allow her to lead a French army? She was a girl, she was a teenager, she had no military experience, but that she actually succeeded in saving France. How do we make sense of that? Well, it's the same way that we make sense of the fact that Christ, who could have come into the world in any form and at any time, was born of the womb of a woman, Mary of Nazareth, and that women, who were not considered reliable witnesses in the first century, were the first to discover Christ's empty tomb and learn of his miraculous resurrection, a fact that all 4 Gospels report. All of this points to the truth Christianity has proclaimed from the beginning. Women, no less than men, are created in God's image and likeness. That means that women share in God's own intelligence and creative power. Each of us has been given unique gifts, and each of us is called to develop those gifts and put them to use to do His will. So, how can Christian women use and develop those gifts to change the world? I will offer 3 ways. First, education. Women should never stop learning about Christian womanhood and the lies and half-truths promoted by Satan out in the world. As women, when we hear claims that don't ring true, for example, that a woman's worth is measured only by her career, that motherhood is a distraction from more important work, or that women are designed to be ruled by men, we have a duty to seek the truth. The good news is that Christianity has the answers. We find them when we draw on the long-standing Christian intellectual tradition. I am so pleased that there are places like Grove City that have not abandoned this intellectual tradition. It is a tradition that was developed by Augustine and Aquinas and really focused on the pursuit of truth. So it was rooted in the ancient Greek pursuit of truth through reason and the ancient Jewish pursuit of truth through revelation, and then illuminated by the light of Christ, and then informed through the years by the greatest works of Western civilization. So that's your philosophy and literature, your art, your theology. And it is in using this intellectual tradition that we can find those answers, when we hear something out in the world that just doesn't make sense. Here I really want to stress the importance of the combination of faith and reason, because God made us intelligent creatures in His own image, and He expects us to draw on Christian tradition, most importantly, to draw on sacred scripture, and to use our reason well. Part of the way that we use our reason when we're looking at sacred scripture is by making sure that we're not cherry-picking a few words, a few phrases from scripture and taking it out of context, or that we're appreciating the different literary devices that are used. So I'd like to give you just one example of how to use our reason when we are looking at our faith and looking at sacred scripture. And the reason I want to give this reason is because this has been a topic of just hot debate on X over the last few months. And this is the topic of male headship in the home. When we look at Ephesians 5 and we look at the beautiful design that God has for marriage that is articulated by Paul, we see that the husband is supposed to love his wife as Christ loves his church. And we all know that that is a sacrificial love. And we know beautifully that the man is supposed to be the head of the household and the head of his wife, and that is a beautiful headship. I will say that that is not a dictatorship. The Greek word kephali is used there, which means head, and it is understood to be a nourisher of the family. There is a Greek word for ruler. I don't speak Greek. It is archon. That could have been used. That was not used. But we also know from the other context of Ephesians that men and women in a marriage are supposed to be subordinate to each other. That actually appears early on in the section. And it's really just a beautiful design where husband and wife support each other. So I think that women really need to be truth seekers and really need to be using their reason as they're looking out into the world and trying to figure out who they are and trying to figure out who they are within their marriages, within their homes, and also within the world. Now, the second way that women can use their gifts to change the world is by becoming the kind of woman described in Proverbs 31, who is worth far more than rubies. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. A Proverbs 31 woman strengthens her family in many ways. She is wise, strong, dignified, industrious. She is even entrepreneurial. She makes and sells linen, she buys a field, and plants a vineyard on it. Now, for the men here, and also for the parents who are raising boys and raising young men, I would like to tell you that the role of a husband is not just to find a Proverbs 31 woman, but to support a wife in becoming a Proverbs 31 woman. I think that's an important distinction. And no one articulated this better than Edith Stein, who was a 20th century philosopher. She was born Jewish, became Catholic, became a Carmelite nun, and she was killed at Auschwitz. Miraculously, many of her writings were preserved. I think this is really important, what she said. She said that one of a husband's beautiful duties within a marriage is to not allow his wife's God-given gifts to atrophy. Isn't that interesting? I woke up this morning, also on X. I realize I've mentioned X a number of times here, but I woke up this morning to a post by Lila Rose, who is the president of Live Action. It's a nonprofit that she started as a teenage girl herself, speaking of Joan of Arc. But I woke up to a report from her on X that last night she spoke at Yale University. Yale has this wonderful tradition. They have a Yale political union, and they have debate. They have someone from the left come, someone from the right, and they debate an issue. And then what's really neat about this event, they have the students vote on who wins. And guess what? Yale University, apparently the organizer of the event was absolutely shocked by this. Lila won. The pro-life position won out at Yale, which I think is absolutely astounding. And I couldn't help thinking this morning about Lila and her beautiful 3 young children and her husband. I've heard her, I don't know if any of you listened to her wonderful podcast, but the way she talks about her husband and their beautiful family life and how much he supports her, I think it's a really neat thing. And I think about the students at Yale. And, I bet there were many young people in that room who had never heard the pro-life position articulated clearly by a conservative. I'm sure they heard the pro-life position mocked and ridiculed plenty of times by leftists. But I believe that Lila probably planted some seeds last night, maybe even changed lives, maybe even saved lives. And you know what? That would not have happened without her husband. Now, my favorite example of a Proverbs 31 woman, somebody who became a Proverbs 31 woman because of the support of her husband, is Saint Zélie Martin. So Saint Zélie is the mother of Saint Therese of Lisieux. She was a 19th century saint. And Zélie was married to a man named Louis. They had 5 daughters who lived to adulthood. And Zélie and Louis had this beautiful marriage. And to support her family, Zélie made lace. She was a very talented lace maker. And her husband, Louis, made watches. He was a watchmaker. So it turned out that Zélie was a better lace maker than Louis was a watchmaker. So Louis quit his job out in the world to come home to help Zélie with her lace making business. And they were successful together as partners. So you're probably hearing some of this about these 19th century saints and thinking, this actually sounds kind of familiar to what a lot of people are doing now in our laptop economy. It's kind of neat because this was very common in pre-industrial revolution families where men and women would work alongside each other in their farms or as merchants in their shops, and both supporting the home economy. And then the Industrial Revolution happened, and we had men leaving and women really just primarily being just at home. But now with our laptop economy, and especially post-COVID, I know several families where the mom and the dad are both home, and they're kind of splitting childhood duties and stepping in and supporting each other and building a really strong culture, a really strong family culture at home, where the mother is very involved in the children's lives and the father is really involved in the children's lives. And I think this is progress. I think this is really, really good. So what Zaley and Louis practiced is what Erika Bachiochi calls a practical wisdom. This is a phrase that I use a lot with the young women who come through our programs. They're trying to figure out how they are going to navigate this new economy. Erika is a legal scholar and the author of a wonderful book called The Rights of Women. And one of the issues that she talks about is how managing household tasks and the family economy and the raising of children is often a matter of practical wisdom for husbands and wives to figure out together, depending on their skills and their interests and what time they have, what other resources, what's pulling them in different directions. And I think that's really important today at a time when women possess certain specialized skills and women are highly educated, graduating from wonderful colleges like Grove City. Now, finally, the third way that Christian women can change the world is by identifying and embracing our Joan of Arc moments. An uncomfortable truth of the Christian life is that it is not meant to be comfortable. Christ is candid about this. He says in John 16:33, "In this world you will have trouble, but take courage, I have conquered the world." Trouble comes in many forms, and sooner or later, most of us feel the pressure to keep our faith private. But there is no such thing as a private Christianity. Ours is an evangelical faith. And when you look around the world, and you look at the young people, especially in this world, what you see is a God-shaped hole in our fellow men and women out in the society, and you see why ours is an evangelical faith. When you see the hopelessness, the unhappiness, and the lack of understanding and appreciation for the value of life. And that is why the Lord commands us in Mark 16:14, "Go and make disciples of all nations." Now, what that means is living our faith out in the open, at work and at school, in our neighborhoods and online. So the beauty and the goodness of our Christian faith can be visible to others out there in the world. I believe that each of us is given moments, Joan of Arc moments, when obedience asks us to step forward. And in those moments, we can refuse, and we can call it prudence, or we can surrender our plans to God's will and discover his providence. When our hearts truly seek his will, those moments become blessings that reshape our lives. I have lived this. For years, I charted my own course. I was not neglecting my Christian duties exactly, but I was pursuing achievement on my own terms. And in 2018, it became clear that my path, what I decided that I wanted to do out there in the world, was not serving my family. So I asked God for courage. And with that courage, I left a role at Young America's Foundation that I had worked hard to attain, that I loved. And I chose surrender. Since then, the Lord has used me in ways that I could never have imagined, and it happened through full surrender. I have written not one, but 2 books now. Just a few months ago, a project that I was working on when I was working at the Ortner Family Foundation on Catholic education was published by Word on Fire. And how crazy is that? Bishop Barron's team reached out to us and said that the little ebook that we had posted for free online was something that he wanted to publish at Word on Fire. And the last I heard, I think we've sold 26,000 copies of that book. Isn't that amazing? But the most satisfying thing out in the world that has happened to me was becoming involved with the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women. You know, this is an organization that I first got involved with in the 1990s. And now I have the opportunity to mentor and educate and reach out to young women and help them figure out what their unique path is and help center them on the fact that God has an individual plan for their lives. Now, this is demanding, joyful work that I feel uniquely called and uniquely prepared to do. I've been thinking about a woman's place in her home and in the world my whole life. And I have learned so much over the years. Like a lot of people of my generation, Gen X, I was very, very poorly catechized. I didn't understand my faith, even though I practiced it as a kid, left it for a long time, especially those college years when a lot of kids we know choose to walk away from Christianity. And then at some point in my 20s, I started reading and I started learning. And so I have learned a lot over the years through amazing women like Edith Stein and like St. Zélie and like Joan of Arc. And I've gained this amazing experience as a wife and mother. You know, it's amazing in your marriage and as a mother how much wiser you are, almost 2 decades into it than when you first started. You know, I share all of this for the sake of the women and men here, because some of you may be hearing a similar call to channel your unique life experiences into an opportunity to evangelize more intentionally. Now, your Joan of Arc moment may not be like mine, or it may be. It may be more public, or it may be more quiet. I want to share with you the prayer that I start every day with, because I think it might help you. Every day, I start with, "Thank you, thy will be done." And it helps me center my activities, and it helps me surrender my ordinary moments to try to use them to do God's extraordinary will. And perhaps it will help you too. Because the reason we seek to change the world is not for power or politics, but for love. Our young people desperately need love. They're aching for it. And I think that when we present an authentic Christian womanhood and we invite young people to experience the joy that we experience in our families, and the joy that we experience when, instead of charting our own path and deciding what our own lives are about, we dedicate ourselves fully to the Christian life. And that is how I think that Christian women can save the world. To change the world, I should say. I'd be very, very happy to take some questions. Thank you.
She's president. She's going to be president of it. But she left because her family needed her at that moment. And so she stepped back from that for a few years. And now I think where she is now is far better than where she would have been back then. So you're part of the divine plan for her. I mean, things worked out. Second, so the Clare Boothe Luce Center, you take interns, right? In fact, we had somebody from Grove City College, I think, who interned there in the past summer, and conferences. So just go to the website, right? Yes, so stay in touch with her, follow up with her, maybe you can get an internship there, go to some of the conferences, maybe even work there full time at some point. Thank you again for coming. Give her another round of applause.